So as you may know, the Big 12 are going to lose Texas and Oklahoma at some point in the next 5 years. They're going to go to the SEC. That's something we've known for maybe a month now, maybe a little over a month at this point, and there's been speculation for even longer than that. But that's not something that's imminent. It's going to happen in the next 5 years or so. It's going to take time for this to play out. Ahead of that, the Big 12 is announcing they're going to be voting very soon. I think it's September 10th is going to be when they're voting on adding some new teams to the league. Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and BYU. Now, BYU does not have a conference in football, I believe. Out of all those teams, the other three do. And they're going to have to tell their conference they're going to have to pay exit fees in excess of $10 million, perhaps, depending on what year they decide to leave. They have to give them a couple years worth of notice for actually leaving their leagues, respectively. I think about 2.5 years, maybe 3 years worth of advance notice. So they're going to not be joining the Big 12 for a while now. Of course, they pay probably additional fees to leave early and join the Big 12 ahead of time, with the idea being that they'll make that money back by being in a Power 5 conference. And BYU does not have, I don't believe they have a college football conference, so they'll be less financially indebted to people when they go join the Big 12. And there's actually a possibility, and this is all from Sports Illustrated, by the way. This is all Sports Illustrated reporting this happening. There's a possibility those four teams could join the league before Texas and Oklahoma even leave. So we might see them matched up at some point during the regular season. Just a quick breakdown of these new teams you're bringing in. Houston's probably the worst of the group, the worst of the four. They've been very up and down throughout their history. I think they peaked as maybe a 10-win team, but I was like 5 or 6 years ago at some point. They've been very up and down as a program. Hit a lot of bumps in the road. They're still a good program. They're just not on the level of one that I would consider competitive year in and year out. UCF, I think they only went 6-4 last year, so not great. Before that, they had a streak of 3 years with 10 or more wins each year. So they were one. Remember, they declared themselves the national champions the one year when they didn't make the college football playoffs. So they've been good. Just the question is, will they be able to step up and compete against Power 5 competition regularly and still be a competitive team that could potentially go out and win double-digit games year in and year out? I don't know about that, but we'll see. It's definitely going to be something to watch. And again, these programs are going to be totally different by the time we get to the point they're going to be in the Big 12. They're going to be entirely new players on these rosters. It's going to be an entirely new recruiting class for all these teams and all these organizations. So UCF, Houston, Cincinnati's a big name right now. Cincinnati's probably a sleeper pick to make the college football playoffs this year, just based on some of the great players they have in Desmond Ridder, Ahmad Gardner. They had James Hudson and James Wiggins last year, who are both very good players, went to the NFL draft. They got a lot of players who are going to be competing for first-round picks this year, including Majay Sanders on the defensive end position. They're a very talented program. Now, will they be able to keep that up and be still on that level by the time we get to the point they can actually join the Big 12? Perhaps. We'll find out. But they're on an up-and-coming program right now. It's basically where UCF was a couple of years ago. We'll see if they can continue that success and make it so it's a long-term transition to being a competitive team that can join the Power 5 conference and still hold weight against upper-level competition. And the last team that was joining is BYU. BYU made it infamous last year with Zach Wilson, that terrific offensive line they had. An offensive line that steamrolled basically everyone they played against, maybe with the exception of Coastal Carolina. And of course, Zach Wilson was the number 2 pick overall in the draft this past year, really elevated that team quite a bit. And BYU has had success in the past too. But last year, of course, really shone out, and now they're being invited to join a conference, the Big 12, to help replace the losses of Oklahoma and Texas. So at the end of this, even after losing Oklahoma and Texas, the Big 12 is going to be expanding as a conference. The only issue is going to be a bit of a watered-down conference. Texas has always been a good recruiting program, but never put together a really winning football team since the era of Vince Young, essentially. They have not been back in a long time, even though they keep trying to come back. It just never happens. Oklahoma, on the other hand, has been a team that's produced a lot of studs in the NFL over the past couple of years and have been constantly competing to make it into the college football playoffs. Losing them is going to hurt quite a bit. I don't know if they're going to get a program out of this expansion, out of these 4 teams, that's going to be able to replace a team like Oklahoma, just from a brand perspective, but also from a competition perspective, based on how good that team is. And right now, they have a lot of NFL talent in that team. Cincinnati is probably the only one of the 4 teams I'm mentioning that's joining the Big 12 that will have that level of talent going into next year. It's really up in the air. Can Cincinnati improve? Can UCF kind of maintain this momentum and bounce back after a bad year last season? We'll see. If that can happen for both those teams that could legitimately compete in their new conference in the Power 5, But there's also the possibility that these 4 teams end up being punching bags for the rest of the league and a bunch of other conferences as well. BYU will be interesting as well. I'm interested to see BYU get up, take a step up, and see where they're going to play, and see how they'll perform when that offensive line is consistently facing high-end talent. But for now, that's all the news we have. Go check out the article in Sports Illustrated. It has more information on the terms that they're going to have to agree to when they join the league, as well as revenue sharing and how Texas and Oklahoma plan on leaving to join the SEC, as well as the timeline for all this happening. So go check that article out on Sports Illustrated. You can find that through the Sports Illustrated Twitter account and also just on their website.